Good morning. Stan Stahl here with Secure the Village, and welcome to our webinar. This month, we're going to be talking to Bob Zukis, who you see here with me, on his new book, The Great Reboot, Succeeding in a World of Catastrophic Risk and Opportunities. It's an exciting thing because in part, will take us into a new way of looking at the world that Bob has, a systems thinking way. And it's a new way of thinking over the last 20, 30 years, even in science. So we're looking forward very, very much to that. So Secure the Village. We are a community-based response to the cybercrime and privacy crisis. We like to think we turn people and organizations into cyber guardians. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. And I just also want to acknowledge just the generous support of our platinum sponsor, the CPA firm Miller Kaplan. So here's kind of the place we're at. You integrate together the challenges of COVID and security to begin with, and all the systemic challenges that we're facing. And I think this cartoon kind of says it all. Maybe we should try a different approach this year. So with that, we are trying a different approach. We've got Bob Zukis, our speaker. Bob, you want to jump in and kind of talk about yourself here, and I'll queue up your slides to get us going.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Great to be here. Thanks for joining in, everybody. My background, I spent most of my career as a PwC management consulting partner, so lived and worked all over the world. Retired from the firm in 2012, was running our IT strategy and ops business, started to get involved in the boardroom community, wanted to do some more entrepreneurial things. Post PwC, I'm a professor, adjunct professor at the USC Marshall School of Business, senior fellow at the conference board in their ESG center, board member for the NACD Pacific Southwest chapter. I've done some early stage work in the SaaS industry, ran a company down in Austin for a period of time, and but my passion has really been understanding the world that we've created and the world that we can continue to shape moving forward, and that's really taken me to what I'm working on now, which is really an effort to take business leaders and make them better systems thinkers, and really get us much more effective in understanding the complex world that we've created, and to mitigate those risks, as well as to drive in a much more significant amount of systemic change. Mm-hmm. So great to be here. Thanks for having me, Stan.
Oh, absolutely. No, Bob, you're when I look at the whole subject of, and here people are looking now at your book. When I read this, I found this you took the particular challenges that we're in right now because of the pandemic, because of COVID, but you look at it in a very fascinating kind of way that brings into play, as the subtitle of the book, Catastrophic Risk and Opportunity. I mean, we're certainly living in that kind of a space now. And as you and I were talking just before we went live, once you begin to see systems and understand the system concept, you see them everywhere. So yeah. I'm grateful that you're here. I'm going to go on to the next slide. Here we are again. You just talked about that, but to begin to talk us through the relevant parts of the book we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, and the genesis for the book, we had been rolling out and teaching business leaders, really CIOs and CISOs, about how to understand their complex digital business systems for a period of time. We launched a very successful program to take them down that path, created frameworks that we're going to talk about in a little bit. But the pandemic hit, and we saw that as a learning moment, because it's the largest systemic failure that most of us have probably lived through in our lives. And it hasn't been just a systemic failure of the healthcare system. That failure then infected and cascaded into business systems, social systems. Certainly it's impacted the political system, economic systems. So we started this cascading effect of systemic failure. And so it's such a universal issue that we're all living through. We thought we would kind of institutionalize in the book. It's a quick read. The Great Reboot. We started this on February 28th, and we knocked it out in 3 months. My co-authors, Paul Ferrillo, Chris Veltzos. Chris teaches cybersecurity at Minnesota State. Paul's a big-time corporate attorney at McDermott, Will and Emery. And our focus really in the book is is telling that story and, setting that common denominator in place relative to COVID, but then also waking people up to the complexity of the world that we've created and that we live in. And we have to get much, much better at understanding that complexity. Otherwise, we're going to continue to have these kind of situations occur. And this isn't the first systemic failure we've lived through. And the book addresses that. But if you go to the next slide, Stan, we've seen this story before, not at this magnitude. But if you look at certainly COVID, if you look at the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster, if you look at the economic meltdown of 2008, these are all systemic failures. So we've created this very complex world, but we don't understand the world well enough. And the silver lining in all this is when the system fails, when you have systemic failure, you have systemic change coming out of the back of the failure. So the same systems thinking skills that you use to understand risk and in the system are the same systems thinking skills that you apply as you look at systemic change and the transformative opportunities coming out of the back of this. So those are really the two sides of the same coin, and we run to tell that story and start to get people focused on systems thinking really to come out of the back end of this much stronger than we obviously came into it with.
That's so true. I mean, when I look at and your book helped me do this, and because you got so many examples in there, just risk and opportunity, danger and opportunity, chaos and opportunity in that sense, that they're two sides of that same coin. So finding the pony, finding the lemonade in the lemon, that opportunity is always there. I should move on to the next slide.
Well, let's just stay here. Yeah, so when we talk about systems, what is a system? And, systems are all around us. And, systems really nothing more than a collection of parts that are working together to serve an intended purpose. So the human body is a natural system. The planet is a natural system. But then the human-made system, the world that we've created is filled with complex systems that we don't understand how those parts impact the performance of the whole. And we saw that in healthcare, right? So as COVID started to escalate out of control, and we talk about this in the book, we kind of dissect what was happening early in the pandemic. You started to see a couple parts of the system begin to reach some critical constraint parts. So the number of ICU beds, America's physician count is lower than most of the developed world. Certainly the natural, the health status of our 330 million people is very low. We're not a very healthy population. And so those things started to converge and threatened to shut down the entire system. And so what happens when you don't understand risk in a complex system, there's two ways to deal with that risk when it starts spiraling out of control. You ignore it and you just take your chances. And we certainly saw that as one approach here in America, or you shut down the system. Those are the only two options you have when the system starts to spiral out of control and you don't know how to control the system. And we see this time and time again. PG&E does this on the West Coast here. The winds. They don't understand how wind is going to impact, the grid and create fires that they're going to be liable for. They paid off billions of dollars for this. And so their approach to that is we're just going to shut down the grid because we don't want to wear that risk. We don't want to wear that exponential risk because we don't know where it's going to come from. So let's just shut down the system. We can do better. We need to do better at understanding how these systems function and service. And they're all around us, right? The car is a simple system. The human body is a very complex system, but economic systems, businesses have become very complex systems. The digital system that powers these businesses is very complex, a multi-part system. And so, we've created a lot of complexity, but we just don't understand how it functions, how it serves the purpose, and what the risks are throughout that system.
Mm-hmm. I see that in this next slide as well. I mean, where you lay out several of these systemic risk failures that we've seen. I pretty much focus on, the cyber breaches, the cybersecurity hacks and all. But again, the Space Shuttle Challenger, I mean, that's one of the, 5 or 6 places that I remember where I was when I heard that news. That's how significant that one is. And certainly the Daiichi Fukushima nuclear power plant, I mean, the danger of that species, to life on Earth even.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about Equifax in a little bit, but the common denominator amongst all of these is really fascinating. We have the ability, we understood the complex system fairly well in all of these situations, including COVID. The World Health Organization had put together, actually it wasn't World Health, it was another organization, put together a phenomenal report in 2017 and we talk about this in the book, that laid out exactly what would happen in a pandemic, the cascading effect and the systemic impacts, and what happened mirrored that exactly. So we understood. And for all of these other situations, we also understood the complex system. What happened is where it failed was at the leadership level. Leaders didn't understand. And the leaders are a critical part of every single system. And so the leaders didn't understand the system, and they didn't understand the complexity and the systemic risks, and they failed at that level, and then it destroyed the entire systems. So that's a common denominator through a lot of this, which led us to, hey, look, we have to educate leaders on these issues much more effectively. We need to be much more better systems thinkers, all of us, because we're all a part of a system, multiple systems, our own system. But that's a common denominator for how these things fail. They fail at the leadership level most severely.
Yeah, no, that's so true. So we'll come back to talk about Equifax later. I know that's a big piece of this. But let's go in and let's do a little bit of just, okay, so what is a complex system?
Yeah, it's, again, parts, connections between the parts, and the systems is designed to serve an intended purpose. Now, when you have a simple system, a pen, a ballpoint pen is a system, fairly easy to understand and, conceptualize that. When you've got a healthcare system that's kind of developed over years, a complex health system, a digital business system that companies have been building up, in their current incarnation since the 70s, and you've got thousands of parts, and you don't understand those interrelationships amongst the parts, it becomes very complex very, very quickly. And there's some things that contribute to complexity that are part of the framework, the size, the interdependency, the lack of or the presence of heterogeneity, the difference between those parts. So systems become complex very quickly, and they can fail pretty severely. Go back to the car example. A simple example, a flat tire brings a car to a standstill, right? That's a systemic failure. That's a risk to the system that will bring the system to a halt and fail, cause the failure of its intended purpose in its totality. Simple failure of a part, a flat tire. We figured that out early, right? And so cars built some redundancy into that system. They put a spare in the tire, and okay, the system would come to a stop, for a period of time, but you could get out with a little sweat equity, bring the system back online. Another innovation has been run flat tires, right? So the system doesn't come to a halt. It degrades for a period of time. It continues running until you can get it back up, because you can only run flat tires at 50 miles an hour, right? Until you can get that repaired. But, a simple example of how we've addressed these issues of systemic risk, and something in a way that most people can relate to. But, with these complex systems that we live with today that are all around us, non-linear dynamics, right? So it's very difficult to predict that if A happens, B is the consequence of it. It doesn't work that way. Very limited predictability, although we can understand this stuff, and we have proven that we do have the capability to understand complex systems when we focus on them. A large number of component parts, some of those parts may be very simple, like that tire, but then their impact on the broader system can be very complex. Then the one thing that tends to get ignored most frequently, pet peeve of mine, is that small events can have big effects. And we've taught business leaders to ignore small impact events, low probability of occurring, but potentially catastrophic impact. Enterprise risk management, when we rolled this out with Sarbanes-Oxley, it taught business leaders to ignore those, just to accept the risk. Well, in a complex system, you can't ignore those. And a lot of times in complex systems failures, like we're going to see with Equifax, it's a very simple failure that then cascades and takes the entire It's a very simple, small failure of a part that then can cascades and takes the entire system down.
Well, I think
So,
just as
go ahead,
an example of what you're talking about, the cascading, if any of us have been on any kind of like a Zoom meeting, a GoToWebinar, what we're on now, and somebody doesn't have, let's say somebody's on their phone in the conversation, but they've got their computer speaker still on, and you hear that feedback loop, and somebody will say something, this is the echo, the echo, the echo, the echo, the echo, the echo. It's a small event having very, very big event, having big effects that way. And so we all see it, but I guess, it's like what you're saying, until you have it pointed out to you, oh, that's the impact of a systemic failure, in this case, the failure to turn off the,
Yeah, and this concept of complex systems, it's been with us for a while, right? This isn't a brand new practice area, but complex systems science is an evolving area. And it hasn't been applied to a lot of the domains that we're dependent upon day in and day out. It certainly hasn't been applied to the digital business system that powers most companies. So we're taking a lot of that work that's been done, and a lot of it's been done in the biological world to understand the complex adaptive systems of the human body, of the planet, planetary health, climate change. Those are all complex systems. So a lot of the work's been done there, and we're really bringing it into the worlds that you and I are working in, day to day. But so that's good news too. Is we're not making a lot of this stuff up. We're just applying some practices to new domains. And when you do that, you tend to have pretty fast gains once you kind of start to think about these things differently and you apply these new approaches.
Oh yeah, yeah, we see that with security. Just when people begin to get it, as we call it, when they're drinking the Kool-Aid, you can get changes to happen very, very quickly, and so much of it goes to leadership. Moving on to the next slide, and you lay out some of the weaknesses with what you're calling yesterday's approach to risk.
Yeah, and risk is just the variance of an expected outcome, right? That's really what risk is. And every business, they have an aspiration to, here's our budget, here's what we want to happen, and what's the likelihood of it happening, and you want to lower that likelihood of it not happening and increase the chances of it occurring. But enterprise risk taught kind of a linear approach to risk. We don't have a lot of precedents for systemic risk right now, so there tend to be weak assumptions for the risk that can impact the system. Enterprise risk looked at the risk of the part failing. It looked at the risk of that tire failing. It didn't look at the risk of that tire impacting the larger system. Probabilities can be a bit difficult to quantify because of their dependency on the other parts. And the old approach dismissed the low probability risks. We already talked about that. And so, we need a new way of thinking to kind of contemplate the realm of what's possible around these complex systems. So instinctually, you might say, well, let's make the system less complex. That's not going to happen. And it's not going to happen for a couple of reasons. Systems in system science, complex systems emerge when they have to serve a lot of functions and purposes, a lot of needs and wants. We have almost 8 billion people on this planet. We all want something new, something different, something unique. And so our needs and wants are very complex. And so the system grows and builds to serve, complex sets of needs and wants. That's just the natural part of the system. So the system isn't going to get less complex, but which forces us to understand the system better. Otherwise, we're going to continue to see these catastrophic failures again and again and again and again. And the magnitude of the failures is going to continue to get larger and larger and larger unless we figure out the system.
So let's take that as a segue and start looking at some case studies, some examples. So here's one.
This was fascinating to me, Salesforce. They called it the chief availability officer. They just added this guy, and his role is to do nothing but understand the systemic risk in the complex digital business system that they've created. You think of what Salesforce is, a cloud pioneer, but their connections and a lot of, they run on AWS, they run on other services, and there are thousands of other services that bolt into their system. So they added a C-level executive whose job is really to do nothing other than to understand the catastrophic and the risk that exists in that complex digital business system that they've created. And that's everything from, if something goes down over here, how's it going to impact our ability to provide a service? If a breach happens over here, how's it going to affect the entire system? So they're viewing, what they've created as this kind of adaptive biological entity that they have to understand, and they have to understand how infection flows across that entity, and to make sure that they protect against, catastrophic disease and the system breaking down in totality.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So some people are starting to get this. I know Mark. He's always a little bit ahead of the curve. Very few people are really getting it where they're actually starting to resource against it. Most boards are asleep on this issue just because they haven't been trained to understand it.
That's right, and yeah, and that the fact the board challenge is one of the things I see is, and we've talked about this before on the earlier webinar that you and I did, just that understanding from the top, that tone from the top as well. Yeah. Of that. So let's go on and take a look at, you've got a slide here on kind of what does a high risk environment look like? What
it looks like most companies, actually. But how do you know a disaster waiting to happen? I think there's a couple of ways that you can look at it at the leadership level. So remember, we said most of these catastrophic failures happen because of failures of leadership. So if you look at the board and the board's composition, most public companies, they actually task their audit committee with cybersecurity risk oversight. Huge red flag to me, because you don't have the skills, capability, and you're not bringing the right attention or focus to that issue. They just throw it in, and it builds a false sense of security that they're actually on top of this issue, when in fact they're not. I'm actually speaking later today to HR McMaster. He just joined the Zoom board. So he doesn't need an introduction. And Amazon just added a high-powered, came out of government in the security space to their board as well. So some of these companies are waking up. We need people in the room that understand these issues. It's not just enough for boards to ask questions. They have to understand the answers.
Oh, yes, that's true.
Yeah, and that's kind of what you've been hearing on this over the last 5-6 years as I've been beating this drum in the boardroom. Here are the 10 questions board members need to ask. I said those questions are useless if you don't understand the answers, right? So get people in the room that understand these issues and organize the board effectively, so you can actually oversee, the complexity of the company that you're running. So, and then so it's lack of digital and cybersecurity skills. So we're seeing that issue all over the place. A few are starting to work on it. A few are starting to fix it. It's kind of interesting if you look at the ones that have fixed it. Walmart's one of the 5 companies in the Dow 30 that has an information management committee on its board, and pretty obvious to all of us probably on the call why they did that, right? The threat of Amazon. So Walmart figured out we need leadership on that threat to us, and they've done a phenomenal job at building up their online presence. And I think I would have to attribute that to the fact that at the leadership levels, they got it, they understood it. So they've had that committee structure in place for years. I always like to pick on Facebook off the back of their $5 billion unprecedented FTC fine for their data privacy problems. And I always like to say that Facebook knows less about data privacy than Mr. Potato Head. Mr. Potato Head's produced by Hasbro. Hasbro's had a data privacy committee on their board for years. Why didn't Facebook get this at the leadership levels, right? And it took the FTC, $5 billion to get their attention, and it took the FTC to mandate that they put a data privacy committee on their board, right? So, there's people out there that get this, but we're the minority, and sometimes it takes a pretty big stick to drive change around these things.
Yeah, Yeah, which is unfortunate, but that is sadly too often the way we humans learn.
Yeah,
How
yeah,
do we
exactly.
judgment? It's from bad judgment. That
Yeah.
that old joke, if you will. So first of all, I love the graphic on this slide, as we've already talked, but we've talked about, a little bit about the world's complex and all of it. I think there's a lot of data, a lot of information, wisdom even on this slide, so to speak, about systemic change and systemic risk.
Yeah, and Frankenstein, he's our poster boy, right, for systemic risk, right? He's a collection of parts. One of the parts was bad and, created a monster because he had one bad part in the system that was built as Frankenstein, right? So he's our poster boy on this stuff. And I grew up watching all those movies with, who was it, Bela Lugosi, Boris Karloff, who played Frankenstein.
Boris Karloff, yeah.
Yeah, he was good. Yeah. And so, but the good news again is, what you just said. So we do learn when there's catastrophic systemic failure, and that's going to lead to systemic change. So we're going to make, so we have this phenomenal opportunity that, it wasn't just one of our systems failed, and it was a catastrophic failure of the healthcare system. So I guarantee you there's going to be reform in the healthcare system, but it's forced business leaders, every business, economies, politics, society, this whole issue of systemic change. And you're hearing those words pop up more. Systemic change, certainly systemic racism, systemic inequality, but people are talking about the system and systemic issues a lot more than they were pre-pandemic. And so, we do get better at fixing systems, and history has told us, when the Challenger shuttle blew up, we came in and we understood the system when we fixed it, right? Daiichi Fukushima, we understood the risk that could occur there, and there was some leadership negligence, and a lot of those issues have since been fixed. So we will fix a lot of these things, and it's fascinating to me what the potential is for systemic change. Foundational, groundswell, tectonic shifts in markets on the back of this. I think we're going to see a lot of that.
Yeah. Now, when you talk that way, it reminds me after the fire on the ground this was back in '63, early Apollo testing, and the Apollo, the spacecraft had a fire on board, and the analysis of it, they talked about having thought about dealing with fire out in space, but they never thought about what if there's a fire while we're still on the launch pad, which is of course happened. And that was described as, quote, a failure of imagination. And what I see happening here, and frankly, it's to the good works of organizations like the Digital Directors Network, what you're doing is, okay, we've got the failures, we're seeing the failures. It may not happen in one's own business, but one can look around at others and see these failures. And those become prods to the imagination. They open up the imagination to, okay, let's look at things a new way. Let's look at things a little bit different way, which is my way of segueing to this next slide, then the one after that as well, the next couple of slides, where we're looking at, well, how do we manage this stuff, Mr. Zukis?
Yeah, and that's exactly the opportunity that we have and that we're executing on, is to teach people about these issues. And it's not just preventing the negative outcome. When you talk about risk, most people think we're just going to stop bad things from happening, but it's also increasing the likelihood that good things are going to occur. And when I talk to corporate directors, they all hear the fear, uncertainty, doubt, the sky is falling, cybersecurity risk. And that is a burning platform, and there's a lot of heat that they're feeling from that platform. But then when I shift the conversation to opportunity risk, the strategic risk, the next revenue dollar, how your markets are shifting, how you're attacking them, how you're dealing with competitive shifts off the back of this, then they really start to pay attention, as any executive would, because they tend to be instinctually focused on, the growth side of the equation, less the calamity side, and they deal with calamity as an after effect. And we can't do that anymore, because the calamitous impacts are getting much more impactful, much larger, right? And that's what these systems failures are telling us. They're getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So we have to mitigate them and understand them. And it starts with transparency. And so, you can't solve a problem you don't understand. So we're teaching leaders, non-leaders, others how to think as systems thinkers. You know, it's interesting in some domains, aerospace and defense, where there's always been the risk of a catastrophic failure of a part in a plane. You know, systems engineers have been taught how to think as systems thinkers for years. Software developers also think as systems thinkers. We haven't really extended and expanded that systems thinking into all the other domains that have become naturally complex, right? So we're starting at the business leadership level, and that hopefully that'll cascade down. And you know, this book was really written as a quickly digestible book for business leaders, but then we're seeing companies like RealWare, there's a RealWare story in here, take it and give it to all their employees so that they can understand these issues too, right? Because they're a part of the system.
Mm-hmm.
So once you kind of get that transparency, and we're going to talk about the framework that we built in a minute, you can start to assess those risks, and then you can start to mitigate them, and then you can create a culture that's very attuned to systemic issues. And aerospace and defense and nuclear power and energy, their cultures are built for resiliency and to understand these issues. It's not just at the leadership level, throughout the organization, different cultural traits kind of imbue the organization to really understand and think along those lines.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, hey, let's just go on to this next slide then. Is your director framework kind of the way you're seeing the pieces of risk management come together this way? I find this really valuable. Just when I first saw this in your book, it's like, yeah, this is cool stuff.
Yeah, for the digital business system. And, you know, we built this as really kind of, you know, frameworks are really just structured ways to think about complex issues and problems, right? So we wanted to give people a bit of a Rosetta Stone, you know, non-technology executives, the corporate directors, as well as the CIOs and CISOs, a tool that they can communicate their world through to non-technology executives, the board members. So we created this framework, and we built white papers. The story of this is in the book as well. So we wanted to really help non-technology people understand the system of the digital business system, right? And reinforce the fact that it is a system. This isn't one thing. And you and I were talking about this earlier with, you know, saying, you know, the IT guy, right? You know, and just cybersecurity gets lumped into IT, right? So we can dissect the system and reinforce to business leaders that this is 8 complex areas that have to come together to work synchronously and complementary to fulfill a value proposition. That's a home run. And very quickly with this image, business leaders get it. And once that light goes on, they say, oh, this is not time for amateur hour. We really need to understand the approach that we take, because there are people that make careers out of the data environment, right? There are people that make careers out of understanding architecture and how IT architectures come together. Risk communications, emerging tech, cybersecurity is one of the 8 domains, critical one that you know instinctually, but it in and of itself is a system, right? All the third-party issues, how IT operates, and then the regulatory impacts of this world, and how all those 8 things come together to drive stakeholder value, right? So we're teaching people how to understand the complex digital business system and how it creates and protects value, and using this framework as a very effective tool to wake them up.
Yeah, well, and I find it also interesting in that, I mean, our focus, of course, is cybersecurity, secure the village, you know, and yet at the same time, I mean, we interface with the other 7 of these areas very, very clearly, and
all the time. Yeah.
Architectures and operations on the IT side. Third parties are more and more and more. They're the conduits by which companies are getting breached. Regulations are getting stronger and stronger and stronger in cybersecurity, just managing, you know, and privacy. I mean, they going hand in hand, all the California Consumer Privacy Act. The emerging tech challenge is, I see that twofold. One, of course, is the technology to drive our businesses, and the other is the emerging technology that flows into cybersecurity to protect our businesses.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
course.
Emerging tech, and we'll talk about this in the Equifax example, but anytime you bring some new tech to the organization, and firms are constantly doing that, that technology brings with it, a cybersecurity footprint and profile that has to be integrated with the entire cybersecurity footprint and profile, right? So those two go hand in hand, right? So those codependencies across these parts are very intertwined.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, particularly when you have users who the emerging tech are things they're bringing in that corporate IT has not approved or blessed or whatever done. Yeah. And when you have people working from home on their own computers, the ability to manage that has just become all the more challenging as well. Yeah. So as I say, when I first saw this slide, I thought, just looking at the different pieces of it and seeing how they connect together and all, I found just very, very insightful. Again, triggers
well,
to
let's go through an example of that with Equifax and how that played out. I think that's what next, right?
We'll get there in just a couple of minutes. This next slide also I found, the right-hand side with its large, small, the quadrants, but then the way those forces on the left-hand side come into play as well. I found this slide very profound.
Yeah, I presented this to the Private Directors Association recently, and what this represents is really that systemic change conversation. So how do we help business leaders take that systemic thinking and apply it to the external forces that are now impacting all of our businesses, right? And you have to understand the difference between, is this a shock or is this a shift in the marketplace? Is this a temporary shock and we're going to go back, we're going to rebound to what it was, or is this a permanent shift? I think we're seeing a lot more permanent shifts because we're seeing substantive changes in mass consumer behavior, right? So this framework on the left, this is an established framework we use in strategic management, steepled. These 8 domains are really the external forces that every company has to deal with to really recognize that their value proposition needs to be relevant to those external forces. And with COVID, every single one of those is being impacted, right? So we wanted to represent to business leaders a way to think about those external forces in a structured way. So it's a useful framework. There's a chair and a chief strategy officer for a board member who's part of the DDN network, and they're using the Great Reboot, and this is what they were looking for to rethink their strategic planning process. So they're using this as a roadmap to understand those external forces. And so what that represents on the right is really how those 8 forces are going to determine whether it's a shock or it's a shift. People should be familiar with blue ocean thinking. Go where there's not a lot of competition, create your market, deliver it cost effectively, and you've got the holy grail without a lot of competition. I did a Forbes article that was about the Perfect Storm, that George Clooney movie, right? Remember George Clooney? He goes past the Flemish Cap, and the fish are just jumping into the friggin' boat, and they fill their holds, but then he's got to go through the storm and they all die. So he found a blue ocean, but it didn't really work out in that kind of context. But what's happening here is, if you look at market size and that degree of shock versus shift, where there's a shift, where there's large scale systemic change in large markets, you're going to see massive deep blue oceans appear where there's not a lot of competitors. And that's the opportunity for most companies right now, to get ahead of where those 8 forces and those changes are taking markets and taking consumers, and to apply themselves to all those unmet needs and wants. Where there's not a lot of systemic shift in markets, so the deadly red tides, the bloody red oceans, given that what's happening from an economic standpoint and the employment factor, shrinking GDP, when the market doesn't shift, you're going to see massive competition, massive price-based competition, because everybody's going to be fighting over a shrinking wallet, right? So if you're in one of those 2 markets, you got real problems, but you better figure out where the blue lakes and the blue oceans are and get innovative, because otherwise you're just fighting a losing battle, right? So a bit of a framework to help people think through where they are strategically and where they want to be and how their world is changing.
Yeah. No, it's just a good chart. And again, so if you look at where we've come so far in the last little chunk of time, looking at what systems are, what the risks are, and so on. And you mentioned from the top, the idea of leadership. So let's focus there for a couple of slides and use leadership. In fact, go to the Equifax case study.
Yeah, and then this is really how those high reliability organizations build a culture around this. And clearly it starts at the leadership level. They create a collective mindfulness. These organizations are reluctant to simplify. They know there's danger in oversimplifying. These organizations from the top bottom are preoccupied with failure. They're preoccupied with that catastrophic failure. And they don't generalize. They defer to expertise. They recognize, for example, in that complex digital business system, that there are 8 very complicated domains there, and they bring in the experts to understand them. They don't generalize around these issues. They certainly understand the impact of real-time dynamics on these complex systems, how quickly a failure can cascade out of control. That's an entirely different dynamic over the last 20 years than we've ever had to deal with before. And it's really a top to bottom commitment to resiliency and being adaptive to these type of changes. So massive cultural drivers and changes for a lot of organizations, not some things that they're necessarily used to doing. And your quote of culture eats strategy for lunch, right? Culture's never easy to get in place, never easy to change, never easy to shift. People, I think play a lot of, talk about it, but it's very difficult to get a large group of people and a large culture established and certainly changed if it needs to be changed.
Yeah, no, that's true. First, I do want to give attribution to the quote. It's Peter Drucker.
Yeah.
I believe who said it, but that's right. I mean, culture eats strategy for lunch, for breakfast, for whatever. And when you look at recognizes and understands the real-time dynamics, ransomware just popped into mind when you said that. That's such an example. I mean, you get your systems breached, you don't even know it. All the information you've got has been exfiltrated. Then as the cyber criminals walk out the door, they push the button that encrypts everything. And all of a sudden, in a moment, that tire has now gone flat, and your systems can run. And it's real time, and yet at the same time, oftentimes there's opportunities to see those things as they're coming, and block them if you've got enough transparency. And again, you look at the culture issues. I mean, are there experts there? Is there a preoccupation with failure? Are they even paying attention to things like ransomware and business email compromise, or are they just focused towards the sales, or mission, whatever that happens to be that way?
Ransomware is a great example. There's this concept in complex systems that the more complex the system, the more there exists an inherent incentive for small actors to come play and extract value from the system, the more opportunity they have to do that. So think about what ransomware does. Ransomware comes in and it's like a mosquito attacking a much larger complicated system, but it has the power to shut down that entire system. Right, but that's an inherent trait of complex systems. They naturally create an environment where people are trying to skim value off of the complexity of that system without having gone to the expense or effort to have created that system. So they have opportunities because the system is inherently complex. And ransomware is a perfect example of an opportunity where they can come in, and hackers have figured out that it's much more effective holding a business hostage and shutting it down than it is trying to fence stolen data, right? That's a much more effective payday, shorter time frame, and much more impactful, hostage, much more valuable environment from a value perspective, a value extraction perspective for them.
Yeah, well said. So let's go on to one of my favorite case studies, Equifax. There's so much to be learned looking at the Equifax system.
Yeah, what we wanted is everybody's familiar with this breach. I think it's cost them, I want to say close to $2 billion now. I have that data point in the book, but very, very expensive, infamous breach, but didn't have to be this way. But it's a case study in systemic failure. So what we did is we took the Equifax, and we have there was a great book written by Graham Payne. Graham was the executive fired at Equifax for this breach. So he wrote a book. So we have a phenomenal amount of insight behind this, and he helped us tell the story that we told in the Great Reboot around this, but we mapped this to the director framework. And so this story goes back to 1970 for Equifax. So there was an act, the FTC forced Equifax to address the fact that they were controlling a lot of consumer data. They wanted, and the consumers felt like that there was errors or misstatements in that data, it would negatively impact them. So it was a consumer protection regulation that came in place that forced Equifax to address the consumer need for transparency and trust to the power and the data that they were collecting around people's credit histories. And so Equifax, this was driven by regulation. The Fair Credit Reporting Act, I think, is what that acronym stands for. So regulators were trying to force Equifax to create trust for the markets. And so, naturally, anytime you build a system, it comes with an inherent cybersecurity footprint. So 2 of the 8 domains are already in play in 1970 for them as the systems map comes online. So if we go to the next slide, so what did they do? So they decided to build a database and a system using the tools and technology they had at their disposal in 1970. So that started to bring in some other domains of the director framework. Clearly, they had to get their operational team to build this. They built this system for their internal agents to use. So people would call in and they needed to collect this information. So they had new data requirements that they had to fulfill to solve these problems if there were credit inquiries or information inquiries, as well as to meet the regulatory demands. And they had to integrate this technology, this interface, or this platform into their entire architecture. So you start to see those lines start to weave across these different domains, and the dependencies start to get a little more complex. So the system is starting to evolve and get more complex. So this system exists since 1970. It's going along great, and along comes the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And the next slide.
Yeah.
So the new technology. So what they wanted to do is they wanted to open up this platform to the marketplace, right? The internet. They wanted to build an interface so that consumers could directly input their inquiry without going through a call center agent. And so they went to find the emerging technology. They used some technology called Apache Struts to build their web interface. So they started to get more third-party tools involved. Those third-party tools bring a cybersecurity footprint with them. Those emerging technologies bring new cybersecurity footprints with them. Those emerging technologies have to be understood and adapted and applied to by their IT team. They have to integrate those emerging technologies into their architecture team. So they layered this on top of the ASIC system and opened up this interface to the external marketplace. And you now see an environment where 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the 8 domains are fully engaged and fully in play for Equifax. So here's where the breach occurred. So in the 8th domain.
Stay here, go to the next slide.
Next slide, yeah, but not exclusively in the 8th domain. The breach occurred in multiple points throughout this architecture for them. Where it originally failed was there was an email that went out to fix a patch that didn't get fixed, which is why Graham wore the heat on that, because he was responsible for that. But it's more than that. So the system, the Apache Struts architecture, there was a certificate that had expired, and so they found that out when they were doing some routine maintenance, and they said, "Oh my God, we haven't been able to monitor the traffic that's been going out, coming through the website, coming through the external interface that we'd put in place," and so they shut it down and they launched this investigation, and they thought they shut it down. So what happened is they started to progress into the investigation. They went back and they relearned that it wasn't just one certificate. There were over 60 certificates, security certificates that were expired. So they had a lot less visibility into the traffic that was going across their network than they thought. And the Apache Struts technology, the vulnerability that came through the regulators' certs had identified this vulnerability and said, patch this. So they thought they'd gone out and patched it. In fact, they hadn't patched all the vulnerabilities that they had because they weren't able to monitor the environment that they had. There was a problem with that, the monitoring tool that they had in place as well, and identifying that Apache Struts footprint across their complex environment. So the patch didn't get applied. They thought they had closed the hole. In fact, the hole was open. The breach came in after the fact that after the point in time where they thought they had closed it, and 800 million, I think that was the number, data records, flew out the door. And it was a complex failure of some very simple things, from risk communications through to the operations of IT, vulnerabilities with emerging technology and third-party risks. So each one of these dominoes started to fall. Boom, 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 opened up this door and this catastrophe. And they even had some things that contributed to the catastrophe as they started to investigate it and respond to it, that were risk communications related. So all of these 8 domains contributed to $billion+ failure in their environment. And individually, the parts of the system that failed, they weren't very complicated. This wasn't rocket science, but they conspired to create this massive systemic failure that they're still paying for.
Yeah. Oh, and what you say, not being rocket science, in the case when it was rocket science, and I'm thinking of the shuttle disaster, that's rocket science. It still wasn't rocket science. It was an O-ring that at temperature got too hard and cracked.
That O-ring was never tested for the launch temperature. When they sent that thing into space. Yeah,
that's right. So I guess even when
but they had identified that vulnerability, that it wasn't sensitive to temperature fluctuations previously, and they just decided to live with it, and they didn't understand the ramifications if that would fail, throughout a launch sequence.
Yeah. So again, even when it's rocket science, it's not rocket science, it's leadership.
Yeah. Well, that goes back to the point, right? A lot of times small failures have enormous impacts in complicated and complex systems. And that's what we're seeing. I mean, think of COVID. One person got infected in Wuhan, China, right? And we have this global catastrophe now, right?
Yeah, absolutely true. So next steps in all of this is, okay, how do we assess and reduce? How do we, let me back it up. How do we get our arms around this and manage it? So is to me where this goes, where this slide.
We got to go back to school. We got to learn about this stuff, right? We got to become better systems thinkers. It's you can't fix what you don't understand. So it starts there, and that's what we're trying to drive forward. And it becomes then the next step. Once you've got that transparency and visibility, you have to understand those critical points of failure and build in redundancy to the system. You got to identify those flat tires and get some spares or some run flats in place, and just understand these systems a lot better than we have. And you also has to recognize that the systems are constantly evolving. It's like the human body, right? The human body is the perfect example of an adaptive system, right? You get a cut on your arm, your body adapts to heal that and cure itself, right? If you look at business systems, they're constantly evolving, they're constantly changing, and they're constantly under attack as well. So that adaptive capability is a problem, but it's there to serve complex needs and wants. But we have to continually understand these issues, continually understand how the system is changing. This isn't you do it once and then forget about it. Here's the ERM assessment with our heat map of the parts and what their risks are. This is a constant challenge and problem for most companies. And get a board that understands this issue, get it out from underneath the audit committee, put the leadership structure in place. All this stuff starts at the top, and then make sure that the management team and the organization is building that culture of resiliency, that culture that throughout the whole organization, that people understand the system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when I looked, and I looked at Equifax much more shallowly than you've done than the others, but the key thing that I saw, and this is basically reading the press, Krebs on security and the rest of the security press on Equifax, and then looking at the Equifax board had their own website. So just taking a look at it, and nowhere on that website did I see words like security or privacy or any of the things that we would expect an organization holding that kind of sensitive information to be managing that piece of it. I didn't see it. And clearly it seems to me that, Equifax did not understand systemic risk, was not managing in any way. You used the Salesforce example of a chief availability officer. There seemed to be none of that at the board level of Equifax.
No, and we're also seeing the stakes go up too, right? So people should have seen that the news last week or two about the chief security officer for Uber facing criminal charges for him covering up a breach. at Uber. That actually occurred before he got there. But Uber's culture, and I've been trying to get Dana Khosrawi's attention on this issue. If you follow me on Twitter, I've been kind of constructively trolling him on Twitter. Uber tucks their cybersecurity risk oversight into their audit committee. So there's a culture, and we know about the cultural problems there under its former leadership. So he covered that up, and now he's facing criminal charges. New York's data privacy cybersecurity regulation that was put in place a couple of years ago. The first enforcement action has been filed against First American Title here in California for a breach. If you look at their board, if you look at they have an audit committee, they have one sentence, it's about 10 words, and we look at information security a couple times a year. That's their governance approach to this. There's nobody on that board that has any understanding of cybersecurity whatsoever. So anytime there's a new regulation like that, you don't want to be the first person that is getting charged under that new regulation. I think they're going to throw the book at them, and I think it's going to be an expensive breach. So regulators are paying attention to this. They're getting tired of it, and they're throwing the book at it financially. And now we've seen a criminal charge against the CSO at Uber. So you're going to be held accountable one way or another to this stuff.
Yeah. Do you think it'll get to personal responsibility, personal liability, breaking the corporate shield?
Yeah, we're seeing that. There's actually been 7 cases under Caremark in the last several years. And what's happening with Caremark is it really goes to the duty of loyalty of the director, and the fact that directors have to actually constructively govern. You can't just dial it in anymore. And so we've got an article coming out in Harvard Law Review to that effect. So what's the trend from how the judges and the courts are looking at this is to hold directors personally liability. Under that duty of loyalty veil, they can pierce the personal protections that directors have and hold directors feet to the fire on these issues. And so that's coming, and that's really what the Harvard Law Review article is about.
Yeah, no, that'll be it. Because again, looking at your 8-piece model, if you will, I mean, the regulation piece is one of those, and that's getting tighter and tighter and tighter. The noose is tightening, so to speak.
Frankly, most companies, I've been beating this drum for 6 years, and most companies, everybody's on notice. Boards know this issue. They've been negligent. It's negligence. This problem's out there. You know about it. You haven't done a thing about it. So, regulators are going to throw the books because this is a huge public interest issue, right? We deserve, the companies that we do business with to do better than they are. And so guess what? If somebody's going to hold you accountable, it's going to be the regulators, because this is a huge public interest issue. So if you refuse to take action, you don't know what to do. It's on you. You've been made aware of what's going on. There's no way you could not be reasonably informed at this stage.
That's right. Not if you're yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let's begin to wind it down. I love this next quote. We quoted Drucker. It's time to quote Deming. But this is so true, that a bad system will beat a good person every time.
That's the thing about what we're doing, and you and I have talked about this, the leaders, the folks on the call, we're all much better systems thinkers than we give ourselves credit for. We just have to start looking at the world as systems. So when we go out and we have executives, the CISO from the MBA was in our Chicago class, and he told me that they've changed their approach to how they look at risk as a result of him coming to the class. Instinctually, we've all been around for a while, and so we have recognized process, we recognize this, but we just need the frame. We just need the frame shifted a little bit, and then we start to see the world as the complex systems that they are. It's very instinctual for us. So we get people up a learning curve very, very quickly, and then they can apply that learning very impactfully. That's the beauty of what we're doing here. We're not reinventing the wheel in a lot of contexts. We're really just applying it to these domains, and people are picking this stuff up and applying it. Yeah. So instant applicability. It's been really fun to work on.
Yeah, no, you're right about that. As we go to your last slide, hold on, there we go. The same way that once you get people to start thinking systemically, think about the thermostat, the way it goes up and down, and it keeps the temperature within appropriate limits. start thinking that way. Start thinking, what are the feedback loops? I mean, your drawings with Equifax just demonstrate. I mean, there's all these feedback loops in complex systems. That's why they're nonlinear. I mean, that brings out the mathematician in me that I once was, thinking about nonlinear dynamics. But that's what we're talking about. Feedback loops. How do we cooperate? Tit for tat with acts of kindness is a strategy for the system of cooperation, if you will. So it's all out there. It's just bringing it into play, so to speak, for us. So with that, I want to go back to this slide deck and talk about the upcoming webinars that we've got. We are starting September 15th, a brand new series. This one's going to be focused to insurance brokers. Insurance brokers live in a dual world, and that on the one hand, their brokerages need security just like every other business, every other organization, but insurance brokers at the same time are out helping their customers navigate cyber risk insurance and getting insurance to cover the damages that might happen as a result of a breach or other kinds of cyber loss. So we're starting, it'll be a monthly webinar. The first one's on September 15th, and we've got Darren McElroy, who's with the Department of Homeland Security CISA organization, who's going to be our speaker. Then our technology and security management happy hour, that's the third or fourth Wednesday, I think fourth Tuesday of every month. It's an evening one, afternoon, 4:30 to 5:30, why we call it a happy hour. Kenji Martinez is going to be there, and he and I are going to talk about something we gave a talk on this once before, on managing the client-vendor interface in IT, so that it's truly a win-win-win strategy for both performance and security, availability, security, all of that. Our next financial services cybersecurity roundtable, that's a monthly series on Friday mornings. We've got Sherry Davidoff of LMG Security talking about the top cybersecurity threats of 2020 as she sees it flowing out through into the financial services community. So definitely want to pay attention to that. Our next webinar in this series, the Information Security Management Seminar, there's some urgency out of COVID-19. We're seeing just a lot more cyber crime happening, a lot more weaknesses in the environment because of the work from home stuff. So Kimberly Pease, my colleague at Miller Kaplan, is going to be my guest speaking on that October 8th. And then we got Darren McElroy back for the Information Security Management webinar, this one for November as well. He'll be speaking. He and I'll be having a conversation on the cyber risk landscape. I invite you to sign up for our weekly Secure the Village News of the Week and Weekend Patch Report. We've got our events calendar is there, but also there's about 25 stories typically a week. We aggregate, break them up into categories of information, individuals at risk, information security management for the organization, cybersecurity in society, stories like cyber freedom, our weekend patch report, and always a cartoon. I'm a big believer that humor is the way to open up the mind to think about more deep things, if you will. So there's always a cartoon there. And it all flows out of the Sun Tzu quote. If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the results of 100 battles. What's not on the slide, if you don't know the enemy and you don't know yourself, you're not going to succeed. You will die in every battle. You'll be defeated. Secure the Village, as I said, we are a community-based response to the cybersecurity challenge. One of our board members, Steve Krantz, has a book out, Cyber Guardian, a Secure the Village guide for residents. He's also been my guest on these webinars, 2 of these. So we've got that, but you can connect with us on LinkedIn, attend events like this one. They're all free. These resources, this will go on the website so you can watch it at your leisure, as well as we're building a big library of educational resources as well. So remember, it takes a village to secure the village. With that, here's contact information for Bob and me. Don't hesitate to reach out. We truly believe in what we're doing and believe in the value of helping others understand this. This is a systems challenge, as Bob has said, that we as a people, we the people, have to get our arms around and understand. And with that, the last slide, I always put this up. I just so believe that what Bobby Kennedy said 50 years ago is absolutely right on. The future is not a gift, it's an achievement, and it's up to all of us, each of us separately. It takes the village to secure the village. It takes the village to secure a community. We have to work together to achieve our future. Bob, again, every time I work with you, this is the second webinar we've now done. But every time we do this, I'm so grateful to you for the wisdom, the insight that you bring to us in these webinars. Any final words?
It takes a village to understand systemic risk and to drive systemic change, Stan. So thanks for having me, and thanks everybody for dialing in.
Super, thanks. And with that, we are adjourned.